So smartphone manufacturer Xiaomi has been on a bit of a mission so far in 2021. Not only has it globally launched its fresh new Mi 11 flagship smartphone, but it's also hoyed out two budget-friendly blowers as well, including this bad boy here, the Redmi Note 10 Pro. And do not stress if you can't afford that mighty Mi 11, because the Redmi Note 10 Pro boasts incredible specs such as a 108 megapixel camera just like that flagship phone, plus an AMOLED screen with HDR10 support and a 120Hz refresh. Seriously, this is a proper unit in pretty much every regard, and the best thing is that the UK asking price should come in at under £300, so for the cost of just one of those crappy iPhones, you could bag yourself two of these mofos and have more than enough change left over for a crate of Drambuie and a sack full of pork scratchings to see you through the rest of lockdown. But of course, sure, yeah, the Redmi Note 10 Pro has fantastic specs, looks really good on paper, but what about the everyday experience? Well, I've had my SIM slapped in there for the best part of a week now, and here's my in-depth Redmi Note 10 Pro review, and for more on the latest greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! Now, my first impressions of the Redmi Note 10 Pro were certainly positive. This is a smart looking slab with only slightly chunky bezels surrounding the screen and fairly subtle branding too. This is the slightly stuffy grey version, otherwise you can also grab a lighter blue or bronze colour here in Blighty. You've got yourself a layer of protective Corning Gorilla Glass 5 covering that display, and as if that wasn't enough defence against scratches and chips and all the rest as well, you've also got a pre-installed screen protector. However, the arse end of the Redmi Note 10 Pro is constructed from mere plastic, like a lot of budget smartphones around this sort of price point, and it has got a couple of light scratches on it already just after a week of use. But at least the thing shouldn't crack when dropped, and Xiaomi has also bundled a condom case in that box just in case. But I got no worries whatsoever when it comes to the durability of this Redmi Note 10 Pro smartphone. Let me tell you, one time it did slam down really hard, and I mean really bloody hard, onto some wooden flooring and emerged absolutely unscathed, no chips, cracks, anything, full working order. And you'll get full water resistance here on the Redmi Note 10 Pro, but it is IP53 splash resistant, so it's alright if it gets a bit damp, just don't go taking it in the shower with you. And yeah, this Goliath is a 6.67 inch handset just shy of 200 grams, so it is a bit of a handful. Certainly if you're trying to use it one-handed, you will struggle, despite some useful gestures for pulling down the notifications bar, all that kind of stuff. There is a dedicated one-handed mode which you can activate via the quick ball feature, and this definitely proves very useful indeed when you're just using apps, although try typing out a message on this thing, good luck. Besides that, the only real annoyance is the jutting camera chassis, which means that the phone will jiggle about like a mentalist when you try using it on a desk. Now, one of the most crotch-tinglingly brilliant features here on the Redmi Note 10 Pro is definitely that 6.67 inch AMOLED screen, which really helps to set it apart from rivals. The OLED tech is a treat at this price point, and it means that you'll enjoy punchy colours, especially if you opt for the saturated display settings, not to mention proper sharp contrast helped along by the super deep blacks. There's full HDR10 support on here, including in Netflix and other streaming services, and given the size of this panel, I was definitely more than happy enough to slum it in bed for most of a morning, watching a couple of episodes of whatever. Visuals are sharp enough despite the size, thanks to that Full HD Plus resolution. You'll enjoy some mighty fine details when you're browsing your photos, dossing off with a bit of anime, whatever you fancy. Plus, the selfie orifice is a proper weenie, albeit centrally positioned rather than pushed off into a corner. I've got absolutely no complaints in other areas either. The viewing angles are perfectly wide, again helps along by the fact that it's an OLED panel, and on top brightness I had no issues whatsoever reading messages even on a really bright day outside. Occasionally the auto screen brightness can be a little bit of a lazy twat and just to take a little while to actually catch up to the ambient conditions, sometimes keeps things just a little bit too dim for my liking, but it's not as bad as some other budget rivals. The only other issue I had was a bizarre screen flicker problem when I was annoyingly wide awake and just browsing random at 6 AM, as you do. Just very occasionally the brightness just seemed to fluctuate, and I tried knocking off the auto brightness, I tried disabling the reading mode, all of that good stuff, nothing seemed to work, and then it just seemed to stop by itself after a few minutes, and touch wood, it hasn't come back. And also impressive, considering this is an OLED screen at a budget price point, is that 120Hz refresh rate. Considering those iPhones cost hundreds of pounds more and still top off at 60Hz, it's a bit bonkers really. And yeah, occasionally the performance of the Redmi Note 10 Pro can't quite keep up with the 120Hz visuals, but overall transitions and navigation and all that stuff is a nice creamy, luscious experience. Your ears are going to love this phone as much as your peepers as well. You've got a stereo speaker arrangement here with very respectable output from that top blaster, while there's also a headphone jack here, which is something that's missing from many premium phones. I'm mostly just stuck to the Bluetooth 5.1 for a wireless experience in instead, and during my whole week with the Redmi Note 10 Pro, no cutouts or judders at all, and the range was plentiful for just wandering around the house without having to have my phone on me at all times. And if you've got some high-res audio headphones, you'll enjoy impressive clarity when streaming high-fidelity tracks on the likes of Deezer. Frickin' awesome hardware aside though, a large factor in how much you'll actually enjoy using the Redmi Note 10 Pro will be dependent on your feelings towards good old MiUI 12. If you get on alright with Xiaomi's launcher, which sits on top of Android 11 here, then good times. But on the other hand, if you're more used to a stock Android vibe, then you might have some issues with the software experience. Personally, I used to really not get on with MiUI at all, but I liked it more and more with every iteration, and now that you've got MiUI 12, I do find that I actually quite like this launcher. Now you get stock Android experiences like the apps tray, thank God. It definitely feels a lot less of a chore to use, and you also get some nifty bonus bits like a control center completely ripped from those iPhone thingies, and that one-handed mode that I mentioned a little while back. You've also got a face unlock feature, which seems to work just fine even if you're wearing a face mask, so not the most secure of options, but handy in the current climate. And that's on top of a rather good and super fast edge-mounted fingerprint sensor. And because the Redmi Note 10 Pro rocks an OLED screen, you've also got a fully customizable always-on display, and there's also NFC support for your Google Pay shenanigans. I'll sort of dive a bit more into some of the special MiUI features in the unboxing of the Redmi Note 10 Pro, so go check that out if you haven't already. And I've also done a separate video on MiUI 12 and how I like it a lot more than previous versions, so go check that out if you want a closer look at some of those features. And bugger all complaints on the storage front as well, because Xiaomi has shoved 128 gigs of space inside of this bad boy, pretty standard. And you've also got micro SD memory card support in there too. So let's shift on to performance, and Qualcomm's Snapdragon 732G chipset is running the show here, the same as what you'll find in that excellent Poco X3 NFC, and it's kept lively by either 6 or 8 gigs of RAM. My review model of Redmi Note 10 Pro is the more modest 6GB version, and it's absolutely fine for everything you need to do. Sure, you'll see the occasional little judder as you're sort of skipping through the MiUI menus, stuff like that's probably more of an impact of the actual launcher rather than the performance of the device. But yeah, games and the like play absolutely fine, like so Call of Duty will run on high detail levels with a maxed out frame rate, and that didn't fluctuate at all mid-battle. The Note 10 Pro's display has a 240Hz sampling rate, which means that I stood a fair chance against any wily school kids out there. That said, I still got my ass handed to me over and over, but that's more to do with my creaky arthritic abilities rather than the actual fun. Oh yeah, you little punk, huh? Well, guess what? The fucking schools are back next week, so fuck you. The only bugbear here is the lack of 5G support. There's no built-in 5G modem in that Snapdragon 732G platform. So if you are looking to get some proper future-proofing on the go, jump on that 5G bandwagon, you're gonna have to look at something different like Xiaomi's Mi 10T Lite, for instance, or one of the other budget-friendly alternatives. I've actually rounded up the best affordable 5G phones you can get right now in 2021, so go check out that video for more ideas. And I've had sod all troubles on the battery front thanks to the mighty 5020 mAh cells stuffed inside here. Not once did I come even close to wiping out the Redmi Note 10 Pro before I was tucked up with Teddy. I usually ended a busy day with around sort of 25 to 30% battery life, and that's with like 6 to 7 hours of screen on time. That's using it as a sat nav occasionally, doing lots of media streaming, Skyping the folks back home, all of that shiz. The 33 watt fast charging works as expected and is again good at this sort of price point, and yeah, there's no wireless charging support, but honestly, if you're complaining about that given the rest of the specs and the asking price of this bad boy, well, you might want to check your expectations. So last up, the camera tech, and that quad lens beast slapped on the back of the Redmi Note 10 Pro is headed up by a 108 megapixel sensor, but don't go expect flipping huge 108 megapixel photos every time. The Note 10 Pro uses 9-in-1 pixel binning to ensure you get bright, good looking pics which still pack plenty of detail and also don't take up lots of storage space, which is a bonus. That pixel binning really helps when you're shooting against the light, helping to keep that color detail in check and avoid oversaturation. Compared with a lot of the competition and Xiaomi's other recent handsets, this is definitely primo stuff. Of course, if you do find yourself wanting to snap a maximum resolution 108 megapixel photo here on the Redmi Note 10 Pro, well, that's perfectly possible and also surprisingly quick too. And you'll certainly notice the difference in detail when you blow that picture up onto a big screen, but this feature only proves competent if your subject is well lit. Speaking of which, when the lighting is rather dim, the dedicated night mode here can help to sharpen up your image. And the second lens slapped on here by Xiaomi is a depth sensor which helps out with those portrait shots which look a proper treat. even with subjects who struggle to stand very still at all. You've also got an 8 megapixel ultra-wide angle lens, and once again the results are solid. Photos suffer from the usual slight distortion, but those colours are close to what you get with the primary shooter, even if the detail levels are of course nowhere near as strong. And last up, of course, my favourite, the 5 megapixel telemacro lens, which yeah, is fine if you want to get up close and personal with your subject, like really up close and personal. Moving on. For home movies, you can shoot 4K video at 30 frames per second, and most of my attempts look pretty good as long as the lighting is alright, that is. Stabilization is decent, you've got no issues with the focus or the audio pickup, and once again you've got features like subject tracking which can pan in and out automatically, although sadly this only works at full HD and occasionally the results were very soft. The Redmi Note 10 Pro's 16 megapixel selfie cam also impresses. Even indoors you often get sharp photos rather than the typically soft, sometimes fuzzy efforts that you get from budget phones. Those skin tones aren't too far off, and the Note can handle tough lighting outdoors as well, complete with very respectable portrait smarts. So that right there is my full Redmi Note 10 Pro review, and flip me over and spank my bottom blue if Xiaomi hasn't guffed out yet another bloody brilliant budget blower. Usually at this sort of price point you can expect some really good features like a shit-hot camera or a really lovely display, but usually you have to make some sort of sacrifices to get those good features, but not here. Here, basically the only omission is a lack of 5G. If that's going to bother you, then maybe check out Xiaomi's Mi 10T Lite, which I absolutely adore as well. But if you're not that bothered about 5G, then it's an absolute winner. So that's enough of my guff anyway. What do you guys think? Are you tempted by the Redmi Note 10 Pro? It'd be great to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Please do poke subscribe and ding that notifications bell if you haven't already, it means the world. And have yourselves a fan-bloody-tastic rest of the week. Cheers everyone, love you!